Vaesen is an ambiguously 1800s gaslight horror set in the mythic North, a fantastical interpretation of Scandinavia created by famed Swedish artist and someone who rocks a peacoat harder than I could ever dream, Johan Egerkrans. I mentioned this one several times in my review of Candela Obscura, and many of you expressed an interest in hearing my thoughts on it. I'm not going to bury the lead, we're basically just doing a study and rave here. Vaesen is a perfect marriage of concept and mechanic with a likewise perfect execution and production. There's extremely few dings and dents in what's happening here, and the writing of the script not only led to me having a deeper appreciation for what they achieved, but for the strength of Thomas Arenstom's Year Zero engine. Free League has adapted the worlds and scenarios built out by artists and directors into their own tabletop role-playing games using the Year Zero engine, with IPs like Alien, Blade Runner, Tales from the Loop, and now The Walking Dead finding a home in the role-playing game genre. In this case, Vaesen is based on the 2013 cryptozoological art book of Egerkrans, Nordiska Vaesen. Vaesen's a sort of like all-encompassing Swedish word for monsters like fae, spirits, and trolls, all of which exist unseen by typical humans and are detailed with their traditional lore throughout the book. Egerkrans built out a whole new envisioning of Scandinavia called the Mythic North, where not only are Vaesen real, but some people have a power known as the Sight and can see them. There's tensions throughout the Mythic North because Vaesen are feeling this loss of power with the rise of Christianity, pushing back against paganism, and industrialization is beginning to encroach on the more rural lifestyles. Now, skipping ahead to sometime in our world before 2020, Free League reached out to Egerkrans to develop the concept into a tabletop role-playing game. Released in 2021, Free League's Vaesen puts you in the role of an investigator with the Sight, brought into a secret society in Uppsala. Your job is to look into the odd goings-on that appear to involve supernatural elements, exploring a world built upon the themes of modernity versus tradition. I love how much this swap in literary basis does to give Vaesen a unique voice beyond just the tabletop game industry. For decades, this specific kind of horror and most dark academia YouTube was overwhelmingly dominated by Hit Point's Lovecraft. I've been pretty vocal about my issues with Lovecraftian horror in concept, like the idea that something is horrific because it's this incomprehensible eldritch thing just kind of gets tiresome once you've done that dance dozens of times over and found better dance partners years ago. Respect where it's due for being the pioneer of a thing and a major inspiration on many brilliant authors, but there's only so many variations on many-eyed alien fish monster I can really go through before the whole affair starts to feel pretty samey. This is where I think Vaesen really shines. If Call of Cthulhu is an investigative horror game vis-a-vis Lovecraft, Vaesen is the same but vis-a-vis Hans Christian Andersen. And Taron has officially overused this bit of holding up books to make you think he's read them all. It's honestly a shame that Lovecraftian rolls off the tongue so much better and more mysteriously than Andersenian, but if the name sounds familiar to you and you're not sure from where, Hans Christian Andersen has basically been giving Disney their movie ideas for over a century. I was writing this bit and couldn't help but imagine Disney trying to adapt something like Shadow over Innsmouth and...
did that.
What?
Yeah, didn't you see Luca?
I was writing this bit and couldn't help but imagine Disney trying to adapt something like Color Out of Space, and when did you ever read Lovecraft?
I haven't, but you wrote the stupid gag in the script and I'm trying to be supportive.
Andersen's work and many Nordic fairy tales carry this darker tone of lessons that speak to the harshness of life and the reality of the world. There's a tragedy to Vaesen that mirrors this darker tone, but I don't want to get too far into what the book kind of considers to be spoiler territory there, but this concept immediately gives the enemies an understandable drive as there's this incredible weight behind their motives. The sense of dread comes from not knowing what Vaesen might be the cause of the problems, and their beguiling and at times desperate nature. While basic human need and desire plays a major role in the mysteries, it's the combination of Vaesen and human intentions that makes Vaesen's concept truly flourish. Let's get the quality of the physical book itself out of the way first. Vaesen's core rulebook is the peak of print production and artistic direction in the tabletop industry. For those of you that have only experienced Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition books, I'm oh so happy to introduce you to not just Free League polish, but likely their crowning jewel. I have about 200 TTRPG books in the room with me right now, and Vaesen's books are undeniably in a league of their own for print quality. The book is a Smith's sewn hardback with a silk bookmark and thick stock matte Munkin paper. One of the standouts is the linen cover stock they chose that gives all the books a linen feel without itself being cloth. It's an inspired choice that elevates it beyond just a game book. It's a gorgeous coffee table art book and conversation piece. Just from holding their book or the revival of Dragonbane, you know Free League views what they do as more than just making games. They're torchbearers for Swedish history and culture. Since this is a review, I won't be going into the mechanics comprehensively like I would in a guide, but there is a fantastic overview on how to play the game over on Ann Richmond's channel that I'll link in the description below. We'll go over a brief summary of attributes, skills, and items, the core resolution mechanic, combat, death, and since this is a horror game, a brief discussion on how this is handling mental injuries. Your character will have 4 attributes separated into 2 categories. Physique and precision are the physical attributes, and logic and empathy are the mental attributes. They range from 2 to 5 and are set during character creation. These are permanent aspects of your character and will not change as you advance. The skills range from 0 to 3 on character creation and can increase as high as 5 during your career as a member of the society. You'll also have equipment and talents that can provide additional bonuses to your rolls. As far as leveling goes, it's not like a dungeon crawler romp, we're just making improvements on our character through our experience that we gain. Now, you gain experience through the questionnaire that's become fairly standard in Year Zero engine games. You get experience for each yes that you can answer on this questionnaire, with one of them just being, did you participate in the mystery? So everyone's going to leave with at least 1 experience point just for playing. Once you accumulate 5 experience, you can spend them to increase either a skill by 1 or choose a talent. Skills are going to max out at 5, but you can continue taking talent after talent for as long as your character survives the story. So for the resolution mechanic, it's using the Year Zero engine, so once you know this, you're going to know basically every Year Zero engine game. So it's a D6 dice pool builder with binary success, meaning you're going to get a clear pass or fail from your rolls, depending on if you roll a 6 on any of the dice used for the roll. In order to determine how many dice you roll, you're going to add numbers as indicated by an ability, skill, and may gain additional d6s for the roll based on the equipment used, aid offered, the situation at hand, or other variables as determined by the story. There's no maximum number of d6s that can be used for a roll, but you do see incredibly diminished returns once you get beyond that 8d6 roll point. Now, this likely puts the chance of success on rolls that your character is built for around the 80% or less range, which is likely going to be a little bit lower than your typical d20 fare. However, the intent is for you to have a much more grounded, realistic character comparatively. This is the thing I love about this for horror specifically. The system is actually encouraging you to hunt for those additional d6s you think could apply to the roll, perhaps similar to a character frantically trying to pry open a window to escape or rapidly digging through their pockets for bullets. Let's try this with an example of how a roll resolves. I'll be using colored d6s for the roll in this character sheet, which has been highlighted with the colors of the dice to show where they came from for the pool. In this situation, my character Vicus has a lindworm slithering towards him, and Vicus wants to bust a cap in its scaly ass with his revolver. This would be a ranged combat roll for 2 dice, using precision to add 4 dice, and the revolver's bonus grants another 2 dice, giving us 8d6 in total. If I had advantage from something I had done earlier, such as research on the weaknesses of lindworms, I could spend it here to add 2 more dice for 10d6 in total. If a 6 is rolled on any of the d6s used for this roll, I would succeed and deal damage to the lindworm. This might feel like a bit of a drag in getting the resolution done, but there aren't any other calculations made after the roll. I'm going to get into why I love both of these things specifically for horror, but first I had a small critique for the official Vaesen dice. They go for around $19 USD for a set of 6, which I just really can't recommend unless you really want your dice to feel on brand and in theme. I think the way that you build the dice pool is much more naturally suited to a set of 10 d6s per player, but I would prefer a set of 15 in 3 different colors. When you're using your principal attributes or skill for a roll, it's just easier to grab the whole set from the color you assign to it without counting them. Like, Freely knows this and did this for Mutant Year Zero's dice set, so I'm not really sure why they made this change for Vaesen. It's not a big deal though, because D6s are so cheap on Amazon that I think you actually make money buying them now. Okay, so why do I prefer binary resolution dice pool systems for horror? The most important mechanic to any tabletop role-playing game is its resolution mechanic. Rolling a d20 set against a threshold has been the arbiter of artificial aptitude for decades, and usually requires the post-roll addition of modifiers and all this other stuff to apologize for having used a zero variance number generator. For the dice pool specifically, the time from deciding to take the action to building the stockpile of d6s to getting the result might feel a bit much, but we're talking about a few additions to find a clear yes-no answer with all the calculations happening before the roll. There isn't a loose target to hit, and this element of searching for d6s has a fun ludonarrative to panicked quick chaos in the heat of confrontations, or rummaging through your inventory for that aha moment when you realize you have another 2d6s you can add to the pool from the equipment you packed, or the salt laid out on the baseboards, or whatever's applying here. Now, that in combination with binary resolution. I adore binary resolution, especially when it's player facing so that they know exactly what to roll. This is a huge reason why I used it for Vagabond. There aren't any subconscious conspiracies about the GM screwing you over. You know immediately if you succeeded or failed, and the game takes the blame instead of the GM. If a game has the confidence in its resolution mechanic to tell the player whether they succeeded or failed in any situation, there's a stronger sense of legitimacy to the rolls. Now, in contrast to that is like the success gradient. Success gradients have the bad habit, I feel, of putting the responsibility of player punishment on the GM. Now suddenly they have to come up with a penalty for the player that they're trying to provide a great experience for, rather than have the game itself be the executioner and allow the GM to unambiguously be a cheerleader and teammate for the player characters. I feel like this is really similar to another game that has high tension stakes and a clear pass-fail mechanic and is also great at evoking some sense of terror and panic. Jenga. You interact with the game by pulling a brick from the tower, you resolve the action by placing the brick you pulled at the top of the tower, and the game hits its fail state and clearly communicates that to everyone when someone knocks the tower over. If this has convinced you that there's a cool mechanic for a horror TTRPG that uses a Jenga tower, I'll put the link to Dread down in the description below. But Jenga lets you know immediately and extremely viscerally when you failed in your task, seeing the results of an action instantly rather than have it go through an interpreter first. The moment you introduce a success gradient into horror, it feels like the game isn't as dangerous and that the GM is getting the role of world builder and safety net against the system's shortcomings. In case you've ever wondered what I think about horror in 5e, there you go. I prefer my horror experiences to be like a roller coaster, where I'm on the edge of my seat before the roll, not after the roll to be determined by the GM, right? It just feels like there's more of the stress and the like, ooh, tension behind the roll, rather than thinking, does that guy tell me now that's bad enough, right? Yeah. These two factors are why I feel the Year Zero engine is just so damn good for horror roleplay. It all puts the arbitration of your action on the system, not the GM. It encourages you to panicked scrounge for anything to help you for these extra D6s in moments of desperation. It's a fantastic cadence of horror happening in the core resolution mechanic, with that feeling of surviving by the skin of your teeth when that one additional D6 made the difference between success and failure. Okay, so health. Condition and health might feel a little bit bizarre if you've only experienced hit point systems. The intent is for conditions to give a rough summary of how you've been impacted by the world, leading up to whatever finally breaks you. If something causes you to take damage, it will inflict either a physical or a mental condition. Physical and mental are the two types of conditions, both of which you can take 3 damage in, and then a final broken state. Upon becoming broken, you'll take a critical injury that can potentially become permanent or cause you to die if it goes untreated. Each condition removes a die from rolls using the corresponding skill and gives a brief idea as to what the injury means to your character. Now, for tables that are going to feel a little bit uncomfortable with maybe role-playing things out, like PTSD, or maybe my character is becoming a schizophrenic or something like that, I've seen suggestions where people have said to just remove the verbiage, really. You don't express it anywhere. It's just you take the mechanical penalty and then let that be what that is. So if your table isn't really comfortable with those kinds of themes, I would suggest kind of doing something like that instead, because the health and conditions are as important to the system as hit points are to D&D. Another really cool aspect of the system is that each time that you take an injury, there's actually a chance that you would gain an additional bonus, as if you've somehow tapped into forbidden knowledge or possibly grew stronger through adversity. You'll need to survive through the elements of the mystery to unlock these boons, but it's one of the more interesting narrative beats to how the world impacts you. I haven't heard of anyone gaming the game by doing something like continuously pushing rolls or something to like try and gain these and then heal up the injuries or something like that. I mean, of course, you just say at the table, like, don't do that, but it is one of the more like kind of odd aspects, I would say, of the system. And so I've seen, but again, this could be one of those things that you just say, look, as for these injuries or whatever, once per mystery that we're ever rolling these boons, something like that. Yeah. Hang on, we need more incense. The vibes are off. Oh. All right. So for combat. In combat, you're going to get a slow action and a fast action. Your fast action is used for things like moving and swapping items, and the slow action is mostly restricted to using skills or taking a second fast action. It's a very simple action economy overall, doesn't require much muss or fuss. All right, turn order. Turn orders run an individual initiative, which is determined by each member of the combat drawing from a deck of 10 cards. After having played group initiative systems and designing one of my own, I really have to be sold on why a system would make the deliberate choice to stay in individual initiative. But since combat is likely only occurring once or twice per mystery, I don't think that this is necessarily a drag. I think the overall pacing of the experience is fine, especially when tactical combat isn't Vaesen's central focus, and you could really, really easily homebrew this. Zones are an abstraction of the space where combat is taking place, and unfortunately aren't described extremely intuitively for first-time readers in the book. The concept of zones makes sense if you think of it as an area that isn't broken up by some sort of an obstruction, but it's still a very loose, abstract idea. I know part of the intention of going with zones is to ease mental load for theater of mind play, but I wouldn't personally mind to try and give these a more solid measure estimate to convey dividing the space more clearly. Fate uses zones and has a bit more thorough explanation, but Vaesen's mechanical text here still works for explaining an abstract rule. Something's distance from you is determined by its number of zones away, starting with 0 for all melee weapons. This is basically the distance it takes for you to like walk up to somebody, punch them, and yeah. It's a very, very loose idea. Movement is all handled with the fast action. That's why they're going with something a bit more condensed down here. The bestiary. Wow. To every aspiring TTRPG designer, take note of Vaesen's bestiary. While you're running one of these creatures, it behaves differently based on its current damage. As you'll see here, there's a checkbox for you to track the damage taken, which you can copy or print out if you have the PDF. There's no tracking certain health numbers, and the Vaesen contains secrets and rituals that the players can uncover to help deal with them when weapons fail. Finally, the Vaesen have a list of plot hooks to inspire mysteries of your own, turning each monster spread into a gorgeous, handy dashboard for ideas, combat, and skimming through to appreciate Eggerkern's impeccable monster artwork. So, with that, I want to thank all of you who responded after my review of Candela Obscura, not just the viewers, but also those of you in the industry and here on YouTube who reached out. It felt like a major milestone moment for the channel to hear that people really wanted to see that much more, like, my analytical style taken to video, so I'm down to do more stuff like this anytime. That outpouring of support really, really meant the world, and in particular, I want to thank Baron from Dungeon Masterpiece, who not only saw the review and reached out, but donated some equipment I've been lacking here to continue making this kind of review. I want to keep doing this kind of thing, and it's my Patreon sponsors that make all that possible. If you'd like to support what I'm doing here, the link is in the description, and you can check out my in-development tabletop role-playing game, Vagabond, and the Land of the Blind storefront. I'd like here at the end, just thank you all so much for being here and sticking with me as I fumble through this whole content creator thing. I think I found a format I really, really love, and I hope you all do too. So I hope you all are staying safe, staying healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.